Don't worry, folks. Don't adjust your sets. Mark Rogers may not be here, but the show continues to go on. Florida is live, the 161st edition, coming to you. I'm Jason Parker, NBC6. Logan Robinson, Noel Game Day. James Coleman, Big Game James, joining us hopefully later on the show once their Wi-Fi's get working. But I do have a special guest joining us, and the myth, the college managing editor from Last Word on Sports, Tony Siracusa. Tony, joining us from Charlotte. Tony, welcome to the show.
Jason, thanks very much. Glad to be here.
So Tony is an expert on Wake Forest, but let's just get this out of the way right now. At Tony Bruin, check him out right now, lastwordcollegefootball.com. Explain to our folks how somebody covering Wake Forest has the Bruin name. Explain that.
Yeah, it probably is a bit confounding. It turns out when I joined Last Word on College Football and Last Word on Sports several years ago and up my Twitter account, it turns out I already had one that I was completely unaware of from years earlier. And apparently my handle was at Tony Bruin. And then it turned out that when I joined Last Word on College Football, I was covering UCLA and the Pac-12 for 5 years. The last year of Jim Mora and then 4 years of Chip Kelly. And so I just kept it. And then life moved me out to Charlotte and my family out to Charlotte, and I'm covering Wake Forest. And, you know, Demon Deacon Tony just doesn't sound right after all those years of Tony Bruin. So we're leaving it as is.
Now, speaking of moving, if it looks like his Wi-Fi is working, Logan Robinson, Mr. Former 850, who's abandoning class and moved to Tampa now with his friend over at Bucks Game Day. Logan, you finally found an apartment.
No, not yet. We do like this one. I'm staying with the friends this week. We haven't moved down here just yet, but that's the game plan after the season. But glad to be on here. I know I missed last week's, but it's been a little bit busy with all the Buck stuff going on and mini camp happening. But was around the facilities at FSU this past weekend. A lot of stuff going on. Got to see some newcomers, so hopefully maybe we can touch on that later. But very nice to meet you, our guest today, to talk some Wake Forest.
Yeah, Logan, nice to meet you.
Let's be honest. Logan just wanted to watch golf. That's all he wanted to do. Logan wanted to watch the matchup. That's all he wanted. He's a Tom Brady guy. So.
No. I'm not a Tom Brady guy. Never will be, no matter if we're here watching him. This is just business, and what needs to be handled needs to be handled. But never will be a Tom Brady fan nor a Bucks fan.
All right. Before we get to talking about Wake Forest, we're going to talk about a little bit of Florida State. Obviously, Logan brought it up. Logan, one of the names that was on campus this week, offensive lineman Justin Turrentine. He's a offensive line transfer coming in from South Carolina, visiting Florida State campus this week. He was a 3-star out of high school out of Stockbridge, Georgia. It's continuing the trend. Mike Norvell seems to love this transfer train. What are you hearing about this?
Yeah, this one, I think Florida State is still wanting to add into that offensive tackle market. Florida State still, I don't think, really liked and felt comfortable after what they saw in the spring, and I didn't feel real too good about it after you lose. If anyone goes down with the ones there, you don't have a lot of guys with college playing experience, and so that kind of hurts you in that regard. Going back into the transfer portal can allow you to bring in some guys with experience. And Jason, pretty well, Mike likes getting guys that have college experience. Some guys that have a lot of college experience, just like Dimitri Emmanuel, who has been playing college football since Jimbo Fisher was still a coach at Florida State. So this is a guy that's had experience playing in the SEC. You add in depth here, maybe can compete for a starting gig if they don't feel good after this upcoming fall camp. But I think this is more maybe it's between a hybrid there of becoming a guy that can come in and contribute right away. We'll see. I think they'll have an official visit set up for him. I know that he was spotted today. Our guy Dustin was watching over by the Moore and saw Coach Atkins, Norvell, going to maybe greet him or bring them into the facilities. So hopefully we'll get some details with him and be able to see how that visit went.
Was this a move that was necessitated by Florida State losing out on the guys lineman from Georgia?
Who I don't know who that is. What's his name? Amarius something. Man, I don't really remember too much all about that, But yeah, I mean, I think there's still one to add there. I mean, you're not going to find the talent that Amarius Mims has. I don't. There's not a lot of that anywhere. Definitely with how young he was and the upside that he'd bring and the high ceiling that he has. And Amarius Mims is on a different level, but if you could bring in a guy of the statue of experience that has played a lot, definitely against some really good talent in the SEC. Florida State's done a really good job in that SEC or at South Carolina alone. You think about Jamie Robinson, you think about Fabian Lovett. Actually, Fabian Lovett's Mississippi State, but for Jamie Robinson out of South Carolina, Florida State's done a very good job there. We'll see if Jamie can maybe help in that recruitment. If Florida State's really heavily going after this grad transfer. It's worth noting he's a grad transfer too. So that helps you in that regard, I believe, in scholarship numbers.
You mentioned some of the other names of players coming around campus. What else are you hearing? What's the latest in recruiting news, latest in transfer news going on?
Well, the first time we got to see, at least during Florida State's the mega camp that was on Sunday, and then Florida State, which I was in attendance for, was the lead day with a lot of talent there in the IPF. You had Chris Parson throwing. You also had Coleman Hope, the 2024 quarterback commit too, who's really, really impressive in attendance. Then you got a guy like Camden Fryer, who absolutely just fried up all the defensive backs. Actually, no pun intended, he was probably your best wide receiver on the field that day, and still a 2024 guy, but has that legacy talent still, Jason. And he was very impressive, not in short, little intermediate throw or catches, but deep ball speed. I mean, he was coming down with everything. Defensive backs couldn't stop him. And then outside of some of the recruits there, recruit wise, you had Cam Davis too, who every time you see him, he continues to grow and look like he does not look like a 16, 17-year-old whatsoever. I don't know what they're feeding him, but that's a 5-star caliber size, running back that is shifty. He reminds me a lot of Dalvin, but just a little bit bigger coming in as what he'll be in a few years as a true freshman. He'll be bigger, but he's got shifty. He can catch the ball, and he can move around, and that's exactly what Mike Norvell likes to do with his running backs. You look at Treshaun Ward, and looking ahead to the season, what they're going to want to do there on offense. There's just a lot of things I like about Cam Davis. But that was practically wraps it up for recruiting wise. And then you look over at some of the newcomers to FSU, some of the true freshmen. I think the biggest standout to me, who was very communicative, walking around, getting to know, getting to really, I think, starting to become that alpha male, I guess, of the class. And practically, I think, let me see, hold up. I think my thing might be bugging real quick. I'm losing. Are y'all able to hear me still?
I hear you.
Uh-oh. I'm bugging. Wait, Jason, you might have to take. Go ahead, Jason. I think you might have to take.
James Coleman finally got his Wi-Fi working in the city of Jacksonville. James is with us today. James, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. How about yourself?
We'll take a look at his picture real quickly. He's got look at that. That's a song right there. All right, James, I'm going to ask you a question before we get to talk about Wake Forest. I'm going to point out something to you that I saw on the internet. Jordan Travis, Florida State, believes he can play this season at 215 pounds. Is it possible for him to gain that much weight to become 215 pounds? Because that man, I love him, but it's possible.
He's 217 pounds right now.
He's how much?
217.
He's something 215. There's no way that man's 217 pounds.
I mean, I think this is weird. Am I sounding good?
You're sounding loud.
Loud?
Yes.
Yeah, it's sounding interesting, and my thing's bugging up here, but I think I fixed it.
There we go. Logan's back with us.
All right. What about now?
You're still a little loud.
I think it might be a different mic you're using, maybe. Can you change the microphone?
What about now?
All right, so
It's still the same.
Last season he was listed at 201 pounds. We talked about how he was a walking immaculate, how he was just susceptible to being injured as being tiny. Can he consistently stay at 215? You say he's at 217 now. Will we see that come regular season?
Yeah, one of the things, I'm sorry I'm loud, but I'll fix this in a minute. But one of the things they found is that he has, like, a couple of guys have a nutritional issue. And they found what that issue is, and they've been able to eat, so he's able to gain weight a little bit better now. There's a couple of guys, same thing with Maurice Smith, something that he has. So once you fix the problem, you're able to work out harder, you're able to bring in more nutrients. And I think he'll probably end up, I don't know about 215. I'm sure he'll play around 200, but that's still about 15 to 20 pounds bigger than what he's consistently played at, which makes him more durable, which is one of the biggest problems he's had is being injured.
Perfect. All right.
Yeah.
We're bringing our guest back with us here. Tony Saracusa, covering college football like nobody else. Tony, Wake Forest. Florida State plays them the 5th game of the season.
Right.
Last season, please explain to us how Wake Forest became the first team since 2008 to win the Atlantic Division. First team other than Florida State to win the Atlantic Division. Only the second double-digit win season in the program's history. What happened last season with Wake Forest?
You know, I think one of the things you look at is that Dave Clawson benefited from being the coach at Wake Forest, where there was an abundance of patience that there wasn't going to be at a lot of other programs. I mean, look, Clawson went there in 2014, had a couple of 3-9 seasons, started to try to put his imprint on the program. And as the years went along, look, we're in 2021. Most coaches don't get that 7-year run, that 7-year leash to try and do it. But it's Wake Forest, where expectations were moderate at best. Hopes were high, but expectations were a lot more reasonable. They had a lot of depth last year. They had a tremendous amount of depth. They had experience at pretty much every position. So you get the season where, as you pointed out, they went 11-3. They went 7-1 in conference. They won the Atlantic Division. They won the Gator Bowl, and all of those things. And Clawson, that put Clawson at 51% winning percentage. So it's not like, he's had this tremendous run. He's had a good 3 to 4 year run of getting them in bowl games and being a lot more competitive. And that really catapulted Wake Forest last year and put them on a whole different level. So he got a contract extension in December. With Wake being a private school, there were no terms of the contract released. But you look at now, building off what they had last year, as Clawson has told me, we're not going to catch anybody off guard anymore. Now it's really a put up or shut up kind of mentality. Last year he had a theme for the program, which was going from good to great. Now it's about mindset. And the thing that he was preaching going into spring camp was, last year was great. We had a great season. Enjoy it. Turn the page. Move on into what's next. You have to focus on what's next, because if you're still going into spring thinking about how successful the season was in 2021, you're going to get your butts kicked, because it's you don't have the right mindset. You're not looking forward enough. So, look, as you pointed out, it was only the second 10-win season in school history. The other one was 2006, and they had a great year. They've lost some key players, but again, since they had so much depth last year, they've got enough coming back. The depth isn't as good this year as it was last year.
Looking at what happened last year, obviously we talked a little bit about that. They started for 8-0, finished the year 10, finished regular season 10-2.
Mm-hmm.
Was that, in your opinion, and let's be honest, Wake Forest before the pandemic had a winning season, so it's like they went from 1-10 to 10-2.
Mm-hmm.
But was this the sign of the future for us, or do you think this was more of a one-time thing?
I think that the answer is it's still to be determined. They've got to put out another similar like season this year for it to be anything other than a flash in the pan. This is very much a what have you done for me lately? Last year was great, and there are all the accolades on campus and in the athletic facilities and the football facilities about everything they did. But if you don't compete at that same level. And I'm not saying they have to go 11-3, 7-1, win the division, do all those things, but you have to be close to that level again. Or last year was a flash in the pan.
Along those same lines, one of the losses was to Clemson. That was their one loss in the Atlantic Division. Clemson is still the. They play Clemson on September 24th, then play Florida State. Is there concern that from that point you have, you could start off 3-0, but you could easily be 2 by the 5th game of the season?
Oh, absolutely. And look, Clemson remains a bit of an enigma, right? Because it's inconceivable. Being from Southern California originally, I watched DJ Uiagalelei from the time he was a freshman in high school, and it's shocking to see the disassemblage of his game right now. And you look at Clemson and having to replace their coordinators, and you look back at last season, and was DJ that bad, or is Clemson's offensive line that porous? Did Tony Elliott do a poor job not accommodating for a running game or lack of a running game to help DJ along? So Clemson remains a big unknown as far as I'm concerned. They should be better than what they weren't that bad last year. Let's be honest. They really weren't. They were bad by historical standards of what they've accomplished in the Dabo Swinney era. But by a national standpoint, they really weren't that bad. It's a big unknown. But it is a tough road when you've got Clemson and then you've got Florida State. And, everyone who's paying any attention expects Florida State to be drastically improved. So, look, I'm a Jordan Travis fan. I like the kid's game. I whether he's at 200 or 215 or 190, I like the kid's game. He's very athletic. And so Florida State's got a lot of returning production. And I think this goes to what Clawson has been trying to impress upon the team. Put last year behind you. It was great. It was fun. Had a great ride. You'll see all the, accolades in there, but you almost got to walk through with blinders on and focus strictly on this season and put it behind you. Like he said, you're not going to catch anybody by surprise anymore. You're going to get teams' best games because of what you accomplished last year. You better be prepared for it.
Yeah, Florida State struggled. When they visited Wake Forest. Florida State had Jordan Travis, but they also threw in Mackenzie Milton, but 6 turnovers in a game for FSU really hurt them, and that put Florida State at 0-3. And I think you're right. Now for Wake Forest another year, can they do it? Can they do something like that again? That would be gigantic for Wake Forest, and they brought great competition to Florida State the last couple of years, and that's something that, as the fan base and people covering the team, that's something that we're not usually used to right now, and it's always and it freaks out fans a little bit. So now Florida State versus Wake Forest are games, and I'm interested to see how that looks like this upcoming season between the two.
Well, and Wake Forest has some question marks. Look, at the start of it, the first thing anyone's going to look at when they look at Wake Forest is you've got a 5th-year senior quarterback in Sam Hartman, right? And I think anyone's going to agree Hartman's one of the top quarterbacks in the conference. And it's a rarity, frankly, in this day and age, to have a guy who's in his 5th year, has played all 5 years in the same program, right? And there's no transfer portal, in Sam Hartman. And the offense is his. And frankly, the team is his. And you see it during spring camp when I was out there covering it, that, it doesn't matter if you're Hartman's roommate, his best friend, or a newcomer on the team. If you're not stepping up, he's going to get in your face. And we saw it firsthand during some of the spring camp workouts. So there's no question that gives them a bit of an edge. He was a 4,000-yard passer last year, but he's also got to improve his game. And you don't hear that a lot about 5th-year seniors. He had 14 interceptions, and you've got to cut down 39 touchdowns and the 14 INTs. You have got to cut down on the turnovers because it's too high of a ratio of turnovers to touchdowns. They've got depth at the skill positions. They lost Ja'Cory Roberson at wide receiver, but they've got A.T. Perry. They're going to rely heavily on him. 1,200-yard 1,200 yards and receptions last year and about 15 touchdowns. They're going to go running back by committee, quite again, like they did last year. They lost Christian Beal-Smith to the transfer portal, but they'll get Justice Ellison, leading with his 500 yards that he had last year and 7 touchdowns. So there is the skill position depth that returned from last year. Some questions on the offensive line. They spent a lot of the spring moving pieces around because they had players recovering from off-season surgery. And, of course, they lost Zach Tom. And so there was a lot of shuffling around, but they think they've got the bodies to do it. The questions are on defense. They revamped the defensive coaching staff, and it was needed. They brought over Brad Lambert from Purdue. Purdue was 33rd or 34th in the country last year in points allowed under him. Wake Forest was 88th. So there's a pretty drastic difference. Wake Forest was 91st in the country in total defense. The idea of bringing Lambert in is to bring a more aggressive style of defense. There was too much of a bend but don't break, with giving up tons of yards in between the 20s, and then all it takes is one decent play, and you're getting points put up against you. So the key was to become more aggressive. And he made some changes as well when he brought in some other coaches. He brought in new safeties coach James Adams, who was with him at Purdue and actually played at Wake Forest in the early 2000s. Glenn Spencer, the linebacker coach from South Florida, is new there also. So the whole point of the spring was to watch the defense become a little bit more aggressive. Now, when you're learning a whole new scheme, and it's a significantly new scheme, you almost had to slow down the offense a little bit in spring early on to allow the defense to get caught up in their learning and their assignments and learning how to react instead of think, as Lambert put it, early on in the spring. We want to get past the point where they're thinking and they're learning just to react based on, now they know the scheme, they know the process. And so for the first, I would say probably 3 weeks, you saw them have to slow down the offense a little bit in the live drills, the live scrimmage drills, in order to allow the defense really to get caught up and get their feet under them. By the end, the defense was fully there. By the end of spring camp, the defense was absolutely fully there. The defensive line looked terrific. You got Kobe Turner, who is a transfer from Richmond, who really made an impact in the spring and really looked good. The linebackers looked good. They lacked depth at linebackers. They lost a couple guys to the transfer portal, linebackers and defensive backs, who were really probably third on the depth chart. So Clausen is going to look to the transfer portal. Wake Forest is not a heavy university where heavily the revolving door is going on the transfer portal. There are very few leaving and very few coming in. But in order to have any semblance of the depth that he had last year, he's going to have to hit the transfer portal this summer, at least for the linebackers and defensive backs.
Tony, before we go back to the spring real quick, I want to touch on something you talked about Sam Hartman. We saw what he did firsthand. Wake Forest beat Florida State by the most points of any team last season. I mean, they're the ones who absolutely handled us. And aside from what Logan talked about, how contributed to that loss, Sam Hartman, when you talk about the core of the ACC, Sam Hartman and Kenny Pickett last season were two who played for the ACC title. Yet, of the returning players, you talk about top quarterbacks in the ACC. You talk about DJ at Clemson, Tyler Van Dyke at Miami. The level of disrespect that Sam Hartman is giving, considering the fact of what he did last season at Wake Forest.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think part of it is because he's at Wake Forest. I mean, again, we're talking about a program that from a national attention standpoint kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, look, we're people who follow college football 24/7, especially during the season, and we watch everybody and everything. We joke in my household that during the fall, the DVR is completely unavailable to anything that isn't college football.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with
that. Yeah, no, and look, fortunately, I married a Southern woman who totally gets it and is on board with all of it. But also because I'm on the voting committee for the Nagurski and the Bolitnikoff and the Outland, I got to watch players from all over the country every week. So we see a little bit of everything. And I saw Hartman a lot, even though I was still on the West Coast last season. And so I knew who he was, how good he was. But I think from a national standpoint of we'll call them the casual fan, it's still Wake Forest. And they have to be reminded of how good Wake Forest was last year. And they have to be reminded what Hartman did last year. So I think there is, I don't know if it's intentional disrespect, but I would certainly say he gets overlooked more than he should.
From the spring, from what you saw in the spring, you covered the spring up at Wake Forest.
Mm-hmm.
Who is Hartman is obviously the number one guy. Who is the name of a player that kind of maybe flew last season, or just someone to watch for? Who should fans be watching out for? And it doesn't have to be just name. Who are some of the names fans should be watching out for?
Sure. I think the first one is A.T. Perry. I think he's a special wide receiver. He's got size. He's got speed. He's the guy who's going to go, he's the guy who's going to go down the sideline for you. He's going to beat he's going to beat the defensive backs with his speed. He was the number 2 receiver last year behind Roberson, but I really think, he's got the skill to be one of the best receivers in the conference. It's hard with the running backs because, again, they're going to go running back by committee, but I really like Justice Ellison in the sense of his running style. He's a guy who you're not going to catch really behind the line. You're not going to get him moving backwards. He's very forward. The legs are always pumping. And, even when there's not much there, he's still going to pick up a couple of yards because of his style of running. So I think those are the guys you're going to look at on offense. I think defense, there's a lot of question marks. Like I said, the defensive backs all through spring, honestly, were very hit and miss. They got beat on the deep balls far too often, even at the end of camp. There is a lot of work that needs to be done during the summer and going into camp to get those guys ready. I look at a guy like Ryan Smenda, the linebacker. I think he's got the chance to have a good season. But like I said earlier, I really like Kobe Turner, the transfer from Richmond on the defensive line. He's got a bit of a beast mentality and was living in the backfield quite a bit during spring camp.
Before Logan was on to ask you a question, we have to do something. We do it in Tallahassee. We do it when he's on location. It's the half of the show. Logan, you knew you weren't going to escape it. You missed it last week. I went last week. I couldn't reach your shoes. I couldn't fit in your size 14s or whatever you are. Tell the fans what the like button.
Yeah. I promise you I'm not at 14. There's no 14 shoes on me right now. Unless I'm really grown, but no. Everybody hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe so then everybody gets notified every time we're live on here. Usually every Wednesday evening. That's when we're live, and now we've got some guests on to kind of give us the real good insight into these teams that we're going to be watching, covering these games all throughout the year. So definitely make sure you hit the like button, comment if you have any questions too for any of us on here. Definitely throw it in the chat, but definitely hit the like button. But I had a question about Wake Forest and their offensive line. You were talking about that. There's definitely maybe some question marks there. And, Florida State, I think their best position group right now after watching the spring is that defensive line group with Fabian Lovett. You got Robert Cooper back, 2 big-time veterans, and you've got even 2 potential starters behind him with Jared Jackson and Malcolm Ray and some other guys behind him like Farmer. And Florida State's, you lose Jermaine Johnson and you lose Keir Thomas, and that didn't seem to be much of a factor there in that third game for FSU against Wake Forest of the season. But still, you're looking at bringing another really, really kind of nasty defensive line. And what are your thoughts on how, Wake Forest is going to try to work there, and maybe some guys that you think will step up and try to control that interior defensive line? And, even if Jared Verse, Florida State's new star defensive end, and Derek McLendon, if those guys are able to kind of take care of things on the edge too, I'm just kind of wondering how that offensive line is prepared heading into the season. Is there maybe a weakness there that Florida State is going to try to take advantage of in this upcoming matchup later in the year?
I think there's a couple things, Logan. I think obviously the first thing is there's no replacing a guy like Zach Tom and just, snapping your fingers and filling in a space. The guy was an elite level left tackle, and had Hartman's back, throughout the season, and was that good. I think part of what happened and part of what we saw with the spring with the offensive line can be a little misleading. Part of that is because there were several guys who missed spring because Wake Forest played deeper into the calendar than what they historically do. And so the nagging injuries that needed healing, the things that needed minor surgery, had to wait until basically mid to late January, and they weren't really recovered for spring camp. I think one of the things, like I said earlier, there were a lot of pieces moving around with second and third team guys getting a lot of snaps. But before anyone pushes the panic button on Wake's offensive line, you got to remember they've got 4 super seniors returning, 4 guys in their 6th season. But they weren't there necessarily for all of camp or any of camp. So I think what happens is Clawson is looking at the ability to come back and say, we have a lot of guys who've taken a lot of snaps. We're going to be able to mix and match pieces throughout the season because we got a lot of the younger guys, some snaps during spring. And so, he's got a lot of experience that he knows is already ready to go. They didn't necessarily need spring camp. It would have been a luxury to have them, but they'll be working out in the summer. There is no one expected to miss the season. The offense came out of spring camp really pretty healthy. There was a couple of injuries on the defensive side, which, again, depth is an issue on defense, but the offensive line came back healthy, and they are coming back very experienced. They just weren't there in the spring. So Clawson's counting on guys just who already know the offense and are ready to plug and play.
Gotcha.
I have a question. I'm going to Wake Forest, and then I want to ask you a question about Wake Forest's thoughts on Florida State. But
Mm-hmm.
You look at what Dave Clawson has done. 6 bowl games, most bowl games for any in Wake Forest history. Like talking about, this is a program who, with all due respect, was kind of bottom feeders in the ACC for them and Duke, bottom feeders for the longest time.
Sure.
Has Dave Clawson taken his spot as the best coach in Wake Forest history? Do you think?
Yes. Yeah, I do. And look, his winning percentage is, he's got the highest winning percentage at the school of any coach in the last 70 years. It's only 51%, but as you point out, Jason, this is Wake Forest, so the bar really wasn't that high. I think what's happened, going back to what we were talking about earlier, Wake Forest's patience with Clawson and giving him the room to move along, put in his program, do it his way. And it was an extension of time that you wouldn't necessarily have gotten other places. But because it was Wake Forest, you got it. And so, yeah, I think right now he sits there. And look, his name was getting thrown around for the Virginia Tech job. His name was getting thrown around for other availabilities. So it was a smart move by athletic director John Curry to wrap him up for however many more years it is. Again, it's a private school, so they didn't feel compelled to release the contract terms. Clawson certainly feels like he's all in. Of course, any coach presents that when you're talking to them on campus, in their facilities and so on. But yeah, I don't think there's any question right now that he's got to be, if he's not the top coach in Wake Forest history, he's got to be in the conversation, at least at the top 2.
I mean, your other options are Jim Rowe. I completely forgot Makovic was the coach there for a minute.
Yeah, exactly. For about a minute. Exactly.
A long time ago on that one.
Right.
Last question from me. You mentioned a little bit before.
Mm-hmm.
I love my alma mater. I love Florida State. But when you mentioned that Wake Forest there's concern with them playing Florida State at this time. Convince me, a Florida State fan, a Florida State grad, why Wake Forest beat us by 21 points, convincingly beat us last season, is worried about Florida State. This is the praise Florida State portion of the program. And so
A couple of things. One, the game being in Tallahassee, and frankly, I'm excited to go down there. So that will be fun in and of itself. But look, playing in Tallahassee is always a challenge. I think Mike Norvell. I was a big proponent of Norvell taking the job at Florida State, and it convinced some Florida State fans that they were going to be thrilled with what he could do there. I'm still sitting on the fence on that as to what he's actually done. Being 8-12 or whatever he is, in his time at Florida State. But I think you've got a lot to build around. They did well with the transfer portal. They've added 10, 11 new players through the portal. You've got an experienced quarterback in Jordan Travis. Wake Forest fans should have no inclination that the game against Florida State this year will be nearly as easy as it was last year. And Florida State fans, since this is the Praise Florida State section of the program, Florida State fans should go in with a much higher degree of confidence than what they had last season.
I like that. We should have the Praise Florida State section. Because Logan likes to be an eternal pessimist because I'm not the biggest Mike Norvell fan, and he's the president of the Mike Norvell fan club. I'm just
Yeah.
Two of us.
Well, we got to remember though, Jason is the biggest ambassador for Willie Taggart. We love Willie Taggart, that is that's the biggest Willie Taggart fan.
Logan, you got a question about DJ Williams?
No, yeah. Well, I was just going to mention too something that we should have brought up. Maybe I don't know if y'all covered it last week's, but it's something about Florida State's roster. I don't think Tony would really care too much about it, but Florida State lost one of its better.
No, I saw it. I actually saw it. If you're talking about DJ Williams, I actually saw that.
Yeah, Tony knows more than maybe Jason does, and we might have a discussion, Jason.
We have to pray. Tony, you're getting praised more than any guest we've had.
I appreciate that. I would just say I would put it in these terms. Running Last Word on College Football as we do, I am blessed to have 20 writers around the country covering different beats. And so there's this constant feed and flow of information. And then, like I said, being on the voting panel for the Football Writers Association All-American team, there's nothing that doesn't get my attention at some point or another, so, and look, I mean, I didn't take California out to Charlotte and took on this new role. And so even though I thought I knew all there was to know about the ACC, I didn't assume it and dove headfirst into absolutely everything I could consume out there. So, look, I mean, I like Florida State's roster. I like the way Norvell has hit the transfer portal and used it to his advantage because there were significant holes to fill. And he went out and got guys that can contribute now, that can contribute this season. That's not always the case with the transfer portal. Sometimes the transfer portal, Wake Forest is going to use it for depth. Wake Forest isn't looking to the portal to get a new starting middle linebacker or a starting strong safety. They're using it for depth. Norvell went out and got guys that are ready to compete now, play for starting positions now. And so I think that he did exactly what Florida State needed in the offseason and in the spring. I mean, this is going to be a very competitive ACC again. You got, North Carolina State. Again, we talk about returning quarterbacks, right? And you look at Devin Leary coming back, with North Carolina State. And he had a great season last year. And he had the kind of touchdown to interception ratio that you would like to see out of Sam Hartman. I mean, he had the 35 touchdowns and only threw 5 picks. And, that's what Wake Forest would hope to get out of somebody like Hartman. So you look at, NC State, again, Clemson being a bit of an enigma and a question right now. Florida State likely to be improved. Wake Forest, very much high expectations now, but they got to put it on the field. So going to make for a very exciting division race.
Tony, since you have everything going on, first of all, I have to ask, you say you married a Southerner. Where is your wife from?
She is from South Carolina, And let's draw the lines right now. She's a Gamecock.
So that's a TC. So all right, yeah, we'll allow it. All right, we'll allow that one. But since you got to go vote, since you got to go get ready for the upcoming season, we probably should come back the week before the game.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know where to find me. I'm glad to do it.
Give us a shot. This is your chance. Push your product.
Absolutely. We got Last Word on College Football. You go on lastwordonsports.com. You got the college football tab right there. You click on it. Right now, our writers are doing a lot of player profiles since it's summer. A lot of articles, like we're running a series right now, the best of. Right now, we're doing the best returning running backs in the Big Ten. Right now, we're doing the Big Ten. We just finished the SEC last week, so best returning running backs, receivers, all of that. Next week, or in 2 weeks, we'll be moving on to the ACC. So look for that, the best returning players by position in the ACC, and then we'll head out and do the Pac-12 after that. So very talented group. We've got a Facebook page. You can find us on Twitter at Last Word on CFB. And as we discussed, I remain at Tony Bruin on Twitter.
I don't think DJ Williams will be on that list of the ACC. But Tony Sakusa, thank you very much.
All right, guys. Have a good night.
Appreciate it. Thank you for the insight.
All right. Have a good night.
You too.
All right, Logan.
Good stuff.
Logan, I now know more about Wake than I ever wanted to know in my entire life.
I know. I don't even know where their stadium is. Maybe I need to fix that. Maybe I should have asked that right off the bat.
I think Gene Cox Stadium in Tennessee is bigger. I think.
Yeah, it might be.
I think.
It might be.
Sure. But you mentioned a little bit DJ Williams. Obviously, he had transferred in from Auburn, native of Sebring in Florida. Auburn to Florida State. Well, I found that interesting. A little 1 year move to Tallahassee. What was behind the reason now all of a sudden transfer?
I think after the spring, he found out that he was going to be put behind in the depth chart. It was about as simple as that. And surprised he kind of stayed as long as he did with the program, to be honest, after what we saw in the spring. It was pretty much a 3-back rotation between Jashawn Ward, Lawrence Toafili, mixed in with Trey Benson there. And really, I think, the explosion, too, of C.J. Campbell, who's a true walk-on, came in and pressed really early, not only in these practices, his size, understanding the playbook. We talked with David Johnson, Florida State's running back coach, and he said the reason why he's able to get these opportunities because he watches film, he understands the playbook really well. So we're going to give him an opportunity to go out there, and whenever he does, he shows out. From a few things that I heard through the spring scrimmages, he was the highlight player there on that offense, just making plays, big time gains, 30, 40 yards down the field, multiple touchdowns. So, you're kind of surpassing and dropping back, and now DJ Williams to that 4th spot. You got Rodney Hill back there. You lost Corey Wren, but, you got a true freshman running back, which you think has a really decent high ceiling too. So I think he kind of got put into another position where he did not want to be, like how he was at Auburn, came to Florida State, expecting more. Sean Ward, that was a walk-on at one point, and now he is your solidified starter, heading into this next season. And, it's going to be a tag team between him and Trey Benson and Lawrence Toafili, but you're still having to compete for PT. Is it a loss for FSU? No. This is, if it were to be a linebacker, yeah, if it was, I'm trying to think, definitely it can't be really on the offensive line. If it was a tight end, if it was anywhere top tier guy, which you don't really have a lot of, that'd be Cam McDonald. This is not a big loss for Florida State. They'll be fine here, even for depth reasons. They're going to end up being just fine. I meant to say, it's not even close to how it was at the defensive end group when he lost with Sean Floor. That was a decent loss in my opinion, just true to depth. That's a guy that has made some splash plays, guy that has really good experience, and I thought was going to have a pretty decent season for Florida State. You lose him for depth, and that does kind of stink. You lose DJ Williams here. It's not going to hurt that much. Like I said, you got some monsters there that we saw right off the bat. That might be your strongest unit on the offensive side of the ball going into this 2022 season. So best of luck to DJ Williams. I'm sure he'll get a great opportunity. And it wasn't like he wasn't improving or, there was bad play from him. It's just simply, guys passing him up on the depth chart, and we'd see little flashes here and there from him, but it just wasn't good enough to beat these other guys out.
Logan, a couple minutes left in the program. Well, fan questions here for you. Makari Vickers in Tallahassee, crystal balling to OU now. What's going on there with Norvell not recruiting in the Tallahassee area? What's up?
That one, I'm gonna have to get our guy Dustin on here and Nate. These names sometimes are. I mean, if we talk recruiting in Tallahassee, I think Florida State's still got to do a better job at this spot. It's been a couple of years. They've had some luck here and there. I mean, you go over to Madison County, you're able to grab Zane Herring, Travis J, but really on the inside there, it's been a struggle. You go outside a little bit to nearby kind of Georgia, you got Cam Davis, but Florida State has continued to kind of have a tough time, definitely with some guys out of Lincoln too that have some high caliber. I believe there's a linebacker there, don't know the name, but Florida State's really not entirely in the mix for him. Florida State's also lost out on some DBs going over to Auburn, going over to Alabama. Florida State is trying to do better in that regard, and definitely locally. But we'll see. And some things too. Some things. Even if you're talented, sometimes this doesn't going to fit the system. Mike Norvell is very big on the character of guys coming inside of his locker room. And personally, I think Florida State and what we've heard, they've left a few guys. I don't want to say some names, but they left out a few guys out of the recruitment after they were strongly after them. But they, saw some personal things that they weren't liking. They didn't think it would be healthy in the locker room, and they're not going to continue to pursue that player, even if they are really talented. It's a 50-50 kind of situation. But Mike Norvell, his focus is fixing that, continuing to fix the locker room. But now he's got to fix. He doesn't want to ruin what he's amended.
John wants to know commitments coming soon after this camp. What are you hearing?
Commits. I think there's some guys that, while working out in front of, there was a big man camp today earlier, and there's some studs there on the defensive line that, Florida State, I believe Wilkie was there competing 2023 defensive lineman that looked good at Florida State's definitely going to be after. I'm going back over to the elite camp and trying to think of a few names. Florida State's after a lot of guys. I'll have to pull up a few names here if you're able to still hear me, Jason. Okay, good. But Florida State is definitely impressing. A few guys definitely, Odell Higgins is very highly respected. I keep an eye on, Derek Kearney, 2023 offensive tackle. Seeing him in person and seeing him visit as many times as he has and talk so highly of Coach Atkins, and just saying now that he just feels comfortable. Like now he feels almost a part of the team every time he comes and visits. And that's just because of Coach Atkins and how well he's doing in recruiting him. I'd like for Kearney, to go ahead and pick Florida State. I feel really good about that and where that status is there at B. Florida State to lose, sadly, that happens way too much, and that should not happen anymore. But that's a very, very, very talented interior offensive line, one of the top in the country. That seeing him in person, size, works a really good job on his body. Got to see him earlier this last weekend. That is a very impressive prospect that Florida State needs to go ahead and seal the deal with them. But I'd keep an eye on him at least this summer. I'm not entirely sure his timetable for a commitment, but if I were to keep an eye, very, very close eye on someone, that's a very talented offensive lineman that you can put him, you can put him in a lot of different places, tackle, interior offensive line. You would like to have him in the fold before the season begins.
Last thing before we go, last comment from a viewer here. I give you a chance as the president of the Mike Norvell fan club to defend or disagree with this viewer. Mike Norvell will be the ACC Coach of the Year in 2022. You want to. I see the look in your eyes. I know that look.
What gets Mike Norvell ACC Coach? I think that's beating both of your rivals. Beating Florida and Miami in the same year, getting back to how it used to be, which, there's definitely a chance there. I think it's definitely rebuilding year for Miami. It's going to take a little while for them to get going. And Florida too. I think they're in kind of the same boat there. So Florida State should have the better traction, and I think it's taking care of the games that you need to. You're able to compete very well with Clemson this last season. I think it's got to be an 8 win, and go to the bowl game, get 9 wins. That's a lot better start than the last 2 seasons, and definitely his career at Florida State. But I'm not going to agree fully. Yeah, I think there's some other coaches that have a higher maybe potential right now, but in order, they like giving it to those coaches that kind of bring a team up from nothing to something, and it's all political and all that kind of crap.
I think he has to go to Coach of the Year. He has to win more games this season combined in his career in Italy. He's 8-13. I think if he has a 9-win season, if they can somehow go 9-3 in the regular season, which I don't think they will, I think he can. But who knows? If he can go 8-4, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah, no, you gotta win probably 9 games.
Panama Jack says we can win the ACC this year. No BS and no overconfidence. The ACC is down right now.
Yeah, like I said, they're going to have to start off winning the games that they need to. And I like the way the schedule is set up for FSU, just because you get a nice little teaser game and you kind of get the feels for who you need to have in. And you get an LSU in their first week. And I think Florida State, as a younger team trying to build here and try to start getting into that winning culture, the way that they were, finishing that season, couldn't do it against Florida, which was just, that was an embarrassing loss for FSU to go in there and, compete against 2 quarterbacks, one that was absolutely atrocious, and you play against an interim head coach while you're able to have your starting quarterback and you're on a really good you're on a hot trend there coming away with wins. That was extremely embarrassing. But starting off, you got Duquesne, and then you go against LSU, which will be great competitiveness via talent. That's going to be 2 talented teams going one another, but it's going to be about who can coach. Those first couple weeks are going to be huge. But I like the way the schedule sets up for Florida State to kind of start getting that wheel going, and they need that. Florida State needs a season opening win, to be honest.
Yes. Logan, hasn't had one since 2016. Logan, push your products. Go.
We're going to push the products.
Push your products. Push your products. What are we looking at for game day and Bucks game day?
Well, we're going live tomorrow night. I believe at 8:00. We've got a former null.
Don't say the word.
No, we've got a former null on there. I can't really say just yet until it's confirmed, but we got him coming on, and I think we're having. Let's just say there will be a Winston. There's a Winston maybe for next week, and we'll keep you guys updated on that one. So trying to get some entertainment going throughout the off season. Make sure you're in the Discord, like Jason always says. Make sure you're in that Null Game Day Discord this whole entire off season. Dustin's in there now full time with us, so he's at all these camps, getting all the interviews, getting you guys all the scoop along with Nate and I throughout this off season. I know we don't talk basketball here, but Austin gives you all the latest with basketball news and nuggets. So, make sure you guys are in the Discord, and then make sure you also hit the like on this video and share with all your friends. We're doing this remote now. We go everywhere.
Are you saying the word as many times as possible here at the end to cover the fact you didn't say it the whole hour?
Oh, yeah. No,
Okay,
I didn't get to say it when I first started, so now I'm going to say it as many times
Marcus
to get in that Discord.
Marcus Enriquez, we'll answer this question next week. We will look at Miami and Florida State schedules. It'll give us a chance to rip on Miami and be honest about Florida State. We'll take care of that next week. And also next week starts our edition. Top 10 hot takes of the upcoming college football season. The first one drops next Wednesday. It's going to make sure to pay attention. I'll be here. Logan will be here. We don't know where Logan will be at that point. He could be in Houston. He could be in LA. He could be in San Francisco. We don't know where Logan will be.
Don't know at the moment.
Mark will be back. Mark will be back in the lead chair next week, 6:00 Wednesday. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Logan, thank you for joining us.
Yep, Jason. Appreciate you. Have you a great evening, everybody, and thanks for hanging out with us.